I have spent over 100 hours playing Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, an MMO that technically hasn't even released yet. Starting back with a few spot tests and then going through the seasons in 2024, and of course now in early access. With all that time in game, all that time spent exploring the world of Terminus, fighting, dying again, falling off of things, dying some more, I have strived hard and reached the high level of 15. And the maximum level right now is it's 40. But that is an important point I wanted to make at the start of this video. One of two, actually. The first point, the reason why level 15 is, well, because this game, this mmorpg, is still in testing. As I've spent this over 100 hours playing this mmorpg, during seasons there were some wipes, leading up to a wipe right before early access, so I made a couple of characters that reached level 12, level 14, and now most recently level 15 now that early access is here. There have also been times where there's little pockets of the game, little pockets of content in the leveling process where it just felt there wasn't enough to do in that one little pocket, like 1 to 2 levels. You could get past it, and then there's more content later, but just some gaps that weren't there. And then the other part is just that, well, I level slow. I level very, very slow. I die a lot in a game that you can lose experience in, and I don't have as much time as I'd like to play. But I die a lot. So it takes time. Don't get me wrong though, because there are other players that have been playing Pantheon that have more than max level. They have gone past the soft caps at times. They have maxed level several times in Pantheon over this same time period, probably honestly in less time than me. I don't want it to come across like, oh, it's gonna take over 100 hours to get to level 20, because that's just not the case. But what's the other highlight? I am biased. I am very biased towards this game. I love this mmorpg. I have been playing this MMO over the past year and a little bit longer. Even in its current state of early access, its testing state, this game, in a lot of ways, it's a game I've been searching for over a decade. It's a game that I have been waiting for over a decade, but it's also a game I've been searching for that long. And it's one that it became, at least the game to play right now, my favorite MMO at this moment. Not my favorite MMO all time, it's still EverQuest. I mean, I'm wearing a Fippy shirt. But my favorite game to play right now. But I'm also going to try to be as objective in this review as possible, because no one gains anything from me sitting here telling you that this game is the best game since sliced bread or sitting in lower guck and getting experience. That's honestly just not going to help anyone. I want this video to be helpful, not just a glaze session. I want to highlight the good, but also the bad, and the downright emergency bad. After this video, I want you to be able to make an informed decision on whether jumping into early access of Pantheon is right for you. Whether you have played games like this before, whether you have played an EverQuest or a Final Fantasy XI or World of Warcraft, or if your first MMO was Throne and Liberty, I want to give you an idea of what to expect. But let's start with the good. First, the combat is fun, like legitimately fun. It is tab target combat with faster actions per minute than what you'll get in EverQuest, but slower than classic WoW, but each action feels a bit more impactful. In games like Final Fantasy XIV, a lot of that slowdown in the tab target combat is based on GCD, or global cooldown. In this game, a lot of the slowdown is actually from your resources being more limited, as well as longer timers on some of your abilities. You'll find yourself sitting quite often to recover those resources, whether you're grouped or not, especially as a caster or a healer. But it's still a very active game. In a lot of ways, I don't think I could have crafted a better combat system for me personally, but that doesn't mean it's perfect. It has gaps, mostly due to some skills not being in yet for some classes. If you liked Vanguard combat, if you liked EverQuest combat, especially when EverQuest became more active in later expansions with more AAs, and even if you liked WoW Classic, I think you'll enjoy the combat in Pantheon. It's fast, it's responsive, and it's deadly. Very, very deadly, both to you and to your enemies. Countering enemy abilities is important, and so is working with your group. Which brings us neatly to the next big highlight. Grouping in Pantheon is great. It's very clear that this is where the heart of the game started, with awesome dungeons like Halnir Cave showcasing this at its finest. Grouping together is a force multiplier. Class synergy is incredibly important in this game, not just the holy trinity like WoW Classic of healer, tank, and DPS, but bringing back the oft-forgotten fourth role of crowd control or support. That role, the controller from D&D, the enchanter and bard from EverQuest, it is very well represented in Pantheon. At the moment, it is well represented through the enchanter and the necromancer, but potentially in the coming year, it'll be joined by the bard. Enemies in Pantheon are deadly, so multiple enemies can very quickly end in a wipe. This is not a game that's going to feel like an ARPG. You will not be gathering up as many enemies as you can and killing them all with AoEs. That's why the fourth crowd control role is so important. They also utilize a skill technique system very well, a newer system that adds more class archetype interdependence, as a melee DPS can open a gap for a caster DPS to maybe reduce the armor class of an enemy or slow them by a set percentage. A slow that will stack with the shaman's slow, for example. It's a whole system that probably deserves its own explainer, but basically it just adds an extra layer of the force multiplier in those groups. It also means that enemies in the game can also do the same things. So again, the enemies in this game are deadly. But in a group, you become so much stronger working together, and you'll have that challenging and exciting gameplay that many of us have been looking for in just the grind to max level, not just waiting until you get to Mythic Plus or higher to actually experience some kind of difficulty, but actually just early on, as early as like level 10. But this next part I think is actually equally important, and it's probably not what most people will think when they think of Pantheon right now. While grouping is definitely the focus of the game, and you'll find yourself missing out on a lot of content if you don't, like delving deep into Halnir, or going to Hangor, the snowy area with a climate that can freeze your body, well, it's also still viable to solo. Solo experience is slower, but it's gotten a bit better recently. But moreover, they recently made a change to add a rare chance for uncommon items, that is, decent stat item upgrades, that drop from solo humanoid NPCs out in the world. Now those were already dropping at a higher rate from group mobs, but now there is a smaller chance that they also drop from those solo NPCs. That means that a solo player or a player looking for a group but playing solo while they do so will still have the ability to progress in the game. They won't get the rare items that are only on named or group mobs, but they will have the ability to get some upgrades. This is essential for a healthy mmorpg, even a social one like this one. For fans of games like EverQuest, we often forget how viable soloing was, especially for certain classes like a wizard, a druid, or a necromancer. Though you won't find any quad-kiting wizards in Pantheon, because again, those enemies are deadly. How many times am I going to say that? Maybe I'm just like scared and shell-shocked from all of the times I have died in Pantheon. It's a lot. Death is closer in Pantheon than it is in EverQuest or other games. It's right there, just waiting, one waylay away, and you're dead and running back to your corpse. The world as it is, even though it is incomplete, is starting to feel expansive, and zone building is getting better and better. I spent over a year in essentially the same zone. Thronefast, the verdant green was great, but getting to branch out into more areas, even those I haven't fully been able to realize yet, like Silent Plains and Eastern Plains, has shown me how different the game can be. From the deep forest of Wild's End with its vibrant colors and evil looking goblins, to the open but still very terrifying Silent Plains with their higher level NPCs and giant roaming rock golems, I guess. I'm scared to like go up here. Oh my god! The fuck? There's still that there. Oh my god, there's more. The thing is huge. Oh god, there. Oh wait, there's a. Oh wait. Oh, it's a rock. Look, I thought this was. I didn't know it was rock. I thought it was. Anyway. Oh wait, where'd the big guy go? He went over that way. The sheer verticality of this city in the middle of the Silent Plains alone had me loving this zone design. A verticality that is helped by an underrated feature. You can climb in this game. It sounded silly to me at first, but being able to climb and explore the world vertically as well as horizontally actually makes a significant difference to the immersive feel. They just need to add more reasons to do that. More tucked away caves with rewards in them for those that are willing to try and climb up treacherous cliffs to find them. More item drops, more secret passageways, more harvesting nodes in hard to reach places. For these next couple, I'm actually going to combine a couple all at once, because they aren't as impactful as the ones I've mentioned above, but they still add to the game. Like itemization that has been growing more impactful with each update. Getting an item feels good. Getting a rare item feels even better. It's much closer to EverQuest itemization than WoW Classic. It's enough that, well, really you'll kind of get enough dopamine hits as you take a long time to level, whether you're group or solo. At least as long as you hunt those humanoid mobs anyway. Similarly, crafting is a work in progress, but it's one that has captured even my interest as a non-crafter. The crafting professions, like classes, work interdependent of each other, so you'll want to make friends with other crafters or work out with your friend group who's taking what profession so you can complement each other. Things like the weather are great if a bit underdeveloped, but the rain really feels good, and when all the fog rolls in, I just want to see more of it. And then in the water, there's currently nothing in it, but the depth and darkness of it, the promise of what's to come is really tantalizing. If you've been playing and you haven't yet, go to the well pond in Wild's End and just take a dip. Follow it down a little bit and just see how otherworldly it feels. Honestly, very Subnautica. Oh, and just be careful not to drown. The next one might be a bit controversial because it's the death penalty, and it's one that could have easily slipped into the bad and still might, honestly. It really depends on what you want out of the game. For some, it's too harsh. I'm actually more on the side of that because there's actually two penalties when you die: experience loss plus item recovery. Though thankfully you keep your equipped gear. I'm keeping it good despite feeling it's a bit too harsh, largely because it does what it's supposed to. It makes the world feel scary. You don't want to die in this game. Something that has been largely missing in MMOs for years. and the fact that there are spells starting at level 8 for resurrections, and level 12 you get corpse summoning for 2 different classes, the necromancer and the summoner, it makes life a little bit easier. Side note, if you see Deadbeard Flynn anywhere and you need a corpse summon, just ask me, I'm happy to do it, as long as I'm not busy. The game's music and sound are some of the best of any games I've ever played, and that's not hyperbole. I've put well over 100 hours into Pantheon, and it routinely is the primary MMO where I keep the sound on. I want to hear the music in different areas. I want to hear the combat music and the ambient noises. It's incredible. The music and sound is done by a contracted company called PVL, who also did the audio for games like Asgard's Wrath 2. Trust me on this when I say, turn off your favorite gaming playlist with Linkin Park and just listen to Pantheon. At least for a little while, and then you can turn on One Step Closer. It's fine. Lastly, it's going to be the value of the game. The game costs $40 on Steam for up to 2 years of access to the game with no subscription and no pay to win. If you enjoy an MMO like this, you will get an insane amount of value out of that time. I've paid more money for less fun in games, and I've paid less money for more fun, but from where I'm sitting, if it's within your budget and the game sounds right, like something you would enjoy, that $40 price point feels like a value. But hold on. Before you go and buy the game, let me talk to you about the bad things. Let me talk to you about the things that are either underdeveloped or just kind of off right now. The first is perhaps the most important to me, and it's one that I bring up with every opportunity I can to try and get it to be really put to the forefront of things that need to be addressed with the game. Questing and lore are largely absent from this game, including, but not limited to, perception. One of the biggest points that had me excited about Pantheon over the years was always the perception system. I am a huge fan of lore in games like this. I've talked about enough that many of you are probably tired of it, but the reason I started writing fantasy novels was because the lore of EverQuest had such a profound impact on me as a kid, sitting in class reading printouts of all the deities in EverQuest. That isn't really here yet in Pantheon. The world itself does not reveal its lore easily to you, not the way it's been promised to. If we go over to the Pantheon wiki, we can see why this is so interesting to me and why it's so frustrating that it's not in yet. In brief, the perception system are essentially a set of skills that bring the world to life around you. You may get a lore ping that says, bones are scattered everywhere. And from that lore ping, you may choose to investigate further, resulting in another ping. Skulls appear human and are brutally damaged. These pings can lead into storylines, perception-based quests that you can accept. This is not really in the game. Yes, there are a couple perception pings, but the true nature of the perception as it's been shown in evaluation builds before, it's just not there. Equally, the questing in game is bare. They exist, some are well written, but they don't evoke anything in you yet. The rewards are more often than not very subpar and become a forgotten part of the game. And for players coming into the game that are not used to games like EverQuest, where you just go out and start killing things, they can feel rudderless. They can feel like they have no guidance. And yes, I know, I understand, you don't want any hand holding if you're interested in this game. But some guidance, some reason for existing within the world beyond just, oh, I'm going to go kill things, is an important thing for many, many players. It doesn't have to be a quest hub MMO. It never will be a quest hub MMO, but some like momentum, essentially, whether it's lore pings or whatever, some kind of momentum to drive the player onward and get them into that mode of, oh, I can go over this hill and I can kill these bandits, instead of, what the fuck do I do, is an important part of the game. But beyond lore and questing, there are areas where content can actually feel sparse. That bandit camp may be next to a big open field of not very much. Parts of the world, like newer zones, don't really feel as fully fleshed out as the zones that have been around for longer, for obvious reasons. They need more NPCs, more points of interest, quests, hunting camps, and hand in hand with that, there's a lack of non-combat activities, which are so essential to a living world of vibrant players. Reasons to go explore. When I was talking about going and climbing up those mountains and seeing what's on the top of the mountain, there's currently, in most cases, no reason to do so, other than like Grand Vista or something. Although there are some exceptions, like going into Howner Cave, climbing up a little alcove and finding just an item sitting there on the like just sitting there waiting for you to pick it up. That's a really powerful item and a no-drop item that you had to go and get it there yourself. There's at least the hope that those kind of things will be expanded out into all these areas, that these kind of reasons to explore will exist in Pantheon. They just don't yet, outside of a couple very key things, like a toenail, a cursed toenail. It's not a joke. There's a cursed toenail that you can find. But it needs locales for socializing as well. It needs non-vertical progression to keep players in the game beyond just hunting monsters. All things that I hope will come in time. On the lesser side of things, there are some issues with missing necessary utility that players that come from games like EverQuest will miss, like there's no corpse locate spells or songs for those aforementioned corpse runs, which can make them downright maddening for players, because unless you do your /lock, no one can find your corpse. You just have to get it summoned. Though I will say that the corpse summon is much more rarely available than other titles, but Invis and Sneak work differently, a little bit less effective, and FD is confined right now to the monk. In a sense, the lack of utility for some things, those spells that round out the player's kit in EverQuest or EverQuest 2 or World of Warcraft, they aren't really there. There are some. Don't get me wrong, Lull exists, for example, and a fair amount of roots and spells that will increase your ability to run faster, but your kit will be smaller in Pantheon. But I think there's one that I think many of us can agree on, including VR, which is the UI. The UI is functional. And that's really about it. Combat text being unmovable, for example, is incredibly frustrating, and there are other issues with it, like not being able to see your pet's health bar on the group window. It's all placeholder and it's all being worked on, and within the next couple of months, I'm sure that some of these things, like the pet thing, will be fixed or added. That said, the UI is still infinitely preferable to me to MMOs that have been around for a while, like Lord of the Rings Online, or my dear long-suffering EverQuest and EverQuest 2. Bugs are going to be an issue. You may die to bugs. You may fall through the world and lose your corpse. You may get stuck in an area where you're zoning in and out when it doesn't seem like there should be a zone. This game is incomplete. It is in early access after all, and thankfully they have Savannah, who is a very, very helpful customer service rep who can hopefully help you find that lost corpse if you can't get someone to summon it. The next one is kind of obvious to anyone who looks at the game. Visuals and animations, especially the animations, are all improving, but also still need a lot of work, kind of naturally. The visual effects have come a very long way, especially the spell effects. Armor is looking fantastic, but it's limited to just a few sets right now. All of this needs more passes, more work on it. Honestly, I would love to see them find some mocap for their animations just to make them a little bit crisper, and really just a couple more passes on everything to get it more up to date. But it's all, again, time. Speaking of the character creator. The character creator is extremely limited. Now, don't get me wrong, it's night and day from being the exact same human as everyone else for over a year, but you can tell the limitations of the team size from the limited options. One of the things I was really hoping they'd get in before early access, for example, but it wasn't managed, is I thought it was important to have different skin tones to choose from, but that didn't make it. But hopefully it will soon. I'd even suggest more character creator options should come before more playable races. Sorry to Scar and Archive fans, and even Gnome fans. But now let's get a little bit spicy because we're gonna talk about quality of life, which is always a little bit intense when you're talking about an older, classically inspired MMO. Not having the static map, which is their plan, is a frustration. I want to be clear on this map thing here though. This game will never have a mini-map radar or radar map where you can see yourself on the map. But they do plan to have a static map. Think EverQuest Atlas maps, but in-game, or Embers Adrift. It's an important, helpful tool, even if you have to uncover the map yourself in-game. There's also just issues in general with not having proper vendors everywhere, or road signs or NPCs that matter. Not being able to make the adjustments to the UI as mentioned earlier, lack of accessibility options, and one particular emergency issue I'll get to here in just one sec. But I also feel like it needs some things that more classic players may eschew, like a courier system or a shared bank, really either or. With limits of course, like timers or costs on the courier or slot limitations on the shared bank. A way to get items to players or your alts that isn't you standing directly beside them. Mostly alts if we're being honest. It also needs some sort of way to actually, hold on, let me brace for this one, because this one might be the most controversial thing I'm gonna say in this video. It needs some sort of, dare I say, auction house. Hold on. It could be the bazaar system from EverQuest, even in its first form, where everyone had their stalls and set up themselves as vendors and had to be online to sell things. It could be NPC vendors like Star Wars Galaxies or Ultima Online, but it needs something. Nostalgia for the EC tunnel is one thing, sitting and spamming trade chat is another thing entirely, especially with the advent of, well, the freaking internet, and the fact that players will just take it offline anyway and make their own website version of it. It really does not have to be the WoW auction house. There are other compromises, other options to choose from, but there needs to be a way for the majority of the player base to engage in the game's commerce, especially with how interdependent things like crafting are. If you force player-to-player trading only, many players will simply just not engage in it. Quality of life that respects the player's time without sacrificing the world's immersion is important. It's a delicate balance to tread where dipping too far either way could be detrimental. So I'm really glad that I'm not the one that has to make that decision, and I guess congratulations VR and all the lost sleep over the auction house, because that's gotta suck. But I did mention one emergency issue, and it's probably not one any of you are currently thinking, or maybe it is, I don't know. I don't know why I said that, but we need ignore. We need some sort of moderation. With the small team that VR has, they will struggle to scale and deal with in-game social problems without the proper tools. There are currently no ignore functions, no report functions, which can lead to issues of toxicity and harassment. An ignore function above all else feels like the most logical and important thing for them to implement as soon as possible. The downside of MMOs is often the same as their positive. People. We, the people who play them, can be absolute dicks. VR, if you're watching this, please prioritize adding in some kind of moderation tools, player moderation, so people can avoid harassment. People can find ways to remove themselves from situations, so those situations don't have to escalate, so that people like the VR team doesn't have to get involved in every dispute, because some of those disputes can be handled by players using those moderation tools. It is very, very important for games like this, online games, community-based games, to at the very least give the tools for players to safeguard themselves from harassment. It's important for the growth, the safety, and the comfort for your community, as seen by other games currently dealing with some pretty intense toxicity issues that are also in development MMOs. In all honesty, a lot of the negatives for this game can be summed up pretty simply by saying this game is incomplete, and if you want to play a complete game, you're better off waiting. At current, Pantheon is the dream of many players who loved EverQuest for its group dynamics, taking on challenging creatures and delving into dungeons. Its lore and world building are underdeveloped though, and it lacks reasons to log in beyond hunting and crafting. In a sense, again, it's just incomplete. But even if this game at the moment is a 90% go out and kill monster hunter game, you get moments like this through exploration that are so worth it.
Wow, okay. Don't fall off, please. I'm gonna try not to. Also, I really don't want to fall off the edge. I so want to jump down into the water, but I feel like I'd miss. I also want to jump down just to see how long it takes to fall. Don't fall off. I'm trying not to, Nat. I will lose my corpse. Don't trust it. I'm at the point where I have to. For the stream, I have to. You just have to. Please be deep enough. Fuck yeah! We didn't die! And now I'm floating! I'm Superman! It worked. Also, I'm gonna drown. Wait. Let's make sure I don't drown. There's some issues here. So asking about the is it as good as EverQuest 1? Stuff like this still needs to be ironed out. We came from here to down here, and we leapt up off here all the way down to here. I would have laughed so hard if you died by drowning. Me too, honestly.
Some of these negatives may be rectified sooner rather than later, as one of the big focuses of VR seems to be getting more lore and relevant questing in the game. How much of the perception system that will include, I'm not really sure, but more lore is good. But even further down the line, there are other things that are important to the game long term that could address some of those non-combat functions as well. Housing and boats. Yes, boats. Boats shouldn't be all that surprising if you were a fan of Vanguard. They were a standout feature of Brad McQuaid's second game, and I can only hope that we'll come across a green armored captain with flaming swords leading his ship one day when Pantheon reaches a 1.0 release. Or perhaps even a lighthouse of some kind. Housing for fans of games like EverQuest 2 or Ultima Online can be a huge investment of players' time. It can engage crafters in making furniture or decorations. It can add to the economy of rare items to go in players' houses, like horse dung in Ultima Online. I'm not joking. Horse dung. It was rare. People wanted it in their homes. Those kind of things are some of the things I look forward to, alongside perception, to truly make Pantheon not just a game beloved for fans of EverQuest, or Final Fantasy XI and other classic MMOs, but a game that it could appeal to a much broader audience than some players might think. The only question is, can it happen? Can Visionary Realms get the resources needed to take the battered but recently triumphant MMO in its early access stage to a 1.0 release? And if they do, what will it look like?